Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Tribeca Trade Group, and this is your end of day market recap for Tuesday, June 21st. So, nice breath day today. From coming back from a 3-day weekend, a little bit of doom and gloom. Over the weekend, a lot of talk about cryptos and cryptos crashing, and a lot of "I told you so's" on Twitter that I heard. A lot of times when you see that type of thing, you do get sometimes reversals. Not to say that area is in an uptrend or anything like that. They're in a downtrend, but a lot of victory laps taken this weekend. And what happens? You get a reversal in some of those areas of the market. So I think that was some of the concern over the weekend that, oh, geez, we got crypto weakness. And by the time the weekend kind of got to the end of it, we saw where Europe was trading, which was up, as well as Asia markets were mostly up as well. That carried over to US markets. Futures were up, and we had some follow through from that today. So pretty decent price action. We'll go through that. A couple surprising areas, especially as we got to the end of the day. There were some areas that really held up well, some areas that started to give back profits, but you can't really complain too much about today in particular. S&P finished up 2.5%. The Qs finished up 2.3%. Small caps still strong, but underperformed those two, up 1.8% for the day. Let me just double checking that. Bonds were down for the day. Didn't get too much attention today, but they were down. And also what I found was interesting too was the VIX was down decently, but just started to kind of, right around like 230, started to climb back and actually finished over 30. So we'll go over, of course, the movers here, but it just kind of reminds me when you see something like that, where the VIX was, I think at one point down below, almost got down below 29. I think it got around like to 29.30. And to see the VIX close back above 30 just reminds me that, we're not out of the woods by any means in terms of whenever we see price action like this for one day. It's a reminder that one day is not a trend. Risk disclaimer in front of you: everything that we're going through is for information purposes only. So let's dive into the technicals really quickly, just to see if we've got anything that really changed here. With S&P, the only thing that really changed on my chart here for the day is that we got back above the 5-period moving average, right? So that's one. It's something to kind of start from, right? We were kind of consolidating around the lows. Remember Wednesday we had just kind of seems like a long time ago, but at this point, Wednesday was the Fed meeting. Thursday was the same thing that we saw in the last Fed meeting, which was a pretty decent move back down. A little bit of consolidation there from Friday, and then we see this pop back up here. So 1 hour chart, right? We could still rally a little bit further on S&P to about 3809 before we get to resistance. So we could certainly continue to grind higher, which is what we saw basically when futures open on Sunday night. Was just kind of a grind into the value area and a move higher. So 3809 is definitely a level to watch to the upside. And we'll just have to see if that kind of comes into play for either tomorrow or Wednesday, if we do get some follow through. Nasdaq, very interesting. And we talked about this level pretty early in the day, that we were hitting resistance, right? So again, little different, different picture here, but that's 11,684 in Nasdaq futures, right? And we basically touched that level today. And you could see it's a little bit more revealing too when we look at the 1 hour chart too. You can see this 200-period moving average coming into play here, where we really haven't been, the price hasn't gotten up to that 200-period moving average in a couple weeks. The last time we did that, remember we had this pretty thin value area that we broke back below. So we're testing it. So we need a little bit more evidence for what's going to transpire here, because we're kind of caught between that 200-period moving average and the top of value for the week, which is is 11,545. So I think this will be interesting to watch, specifically for tomorrow. Russell futures, as I mentioned, they did fine today, up 1.8%, and they're inside the value area. And notice, like, the high of the day there was about 11 o'clock today, right? About 11 o'clock, and things kind of so right into here, right about 10:55. We kind of peaked out there, try to rally back a little bit, and just made higher lows for the rest of the day in futures. And then bonds also, as I wanted to mention, looks like they're rallying here in the after hours, so that's interesting. But we did fall into the value area for the week. 134 will be the level to watch. Let's see if TLT is moving as well. Yeah, that's interesting. I'm not sure what's going on with bonds here in the after hours. I don't see any major headlines, but a little bit of a bid in bonds. They closed at 110, so it's up about 50 cents from there. So somebody's doing a little bit of buying in the bond market. Interesting move there. I mentioned the VIX. We'll just glance at that just to kind of give you a sense. But here was this move up that we saw in the afternoon. So no breakdown there. We do have, of course, some more events. It's not quite as busy as a week as it was last week with all those central bank meetings. But if you want to look at the calendar for this week, right, we've got Powell testimony a couple times this week, right? Whenever there's a Fed meeting, he does testify in front of Congress, right? So we got that going on this week. We're going to have University of Michigan sentiment, but this is what we have for a shortened week for this week. All right, areas of strength for the day, and so let's bring this back up. So what was interesting was I noticed, like, in the early going today, ARK was up. Right, the ARK fund, again, just a proxy to kind of like risk on, risk off, was up over 6%, but it did again outperformed definitely, but you can kind of see it ran out of steam there. Now contrast this with what happened with energy stocks today, and energy stocks kind of just gained strength throughout the session, right? It's not like they rallied hard at the end of the day. They just didn't give back any gains. So you could see for the performance for the day, right, for the best performers, you had XLE and OIH, and where's XOPs up? We're all over 3% for the day. So I wanted to kind of see how this was going to work out today with the energy stocks after getting really hit hard last week. I don't think anything really on here in the energy space, but crude did hold the 50-day moving average, and nat gas, which was down 5%, actually came back quite a bit and finished down 1.4% for the day. I looked at a bunch of charts, like just nothing was appealing to me yet, right? Like you look at, for example, Devon Energy, inside day, right? Exxon was one of the better performing names today, up 6% today. 92.33 is something that I'm watching, but if you bought the dip at the end of the day on Friday, you got rewarded a little bit by playing that game. I think I just need some more time. OVV saw calls. Like, I don't like to mess with things that have stayed above the 50-day moving average for a long time and then really kind of get hit and dragged below it. But the way that it's working out right now for some trades is like I said, if you bought Friday's close, the weakness, you could have taken that trade off today and not go back to not having any exposure, because CVE was another name that saw call buying. But here's a good example, right? Has held the 50-day moving average for so long, broke through, retest, and you could either go back higher here or you could start sinking below. To me, that's not much edge, so I didn't do anything. One name that acted pretty well was BPT in this group, right? That was up 18%, so again, very strong. And also the coal names bounced back quite nicely too. So an Arch was up 5.7% for the day. Again, failure to break down, also did not close nearly on the highs of the day. So again, whippy price action all over the place today. Names that I assembled and was watching for this week, did very well. We had a bunch of names that did pretty well. My area that I have been seeing some relative strength, for the last couple of weeks. You've heard me talk about this group multiple times. I put out a post about it this weekend. Is the China group? Continues to act very well. And as always, what I tend to do is look at the group first. Look to see where there's relative strength. And then what I'll do is I'll draw in to look at the individual names. So both KWEB, the China Internet ETF, as well as ASHR, which is Shanghai shares, so A shares, right, which is much different than the Hang Seng, right? H as in Harry versus A as in Apple, right? Different exchanges that these list on, but this just saw a ton of calls today. All kinds of positioning going into ASHR. I did take a position in this. I also talked about on Bloomberg on Friday, going long KWEB calls. I took that a good portion of that trade off today. They traded up. I think those calls traded up to about 210, right, from where I put those on late in the day on Friday for 160. Also, a trade that we saw positioning ahead of FOMC last week, which was the global clean energy ETF. I managed to kind of cash that in for a double today as well. So nice. And then, just kind of, these gap up days are kind of difficult because you don't know if you're going to see that quick move for the first 15 minutes and then a fade. Some areas of the market did see that. Right, so I'll go through that in just a second, but just sticking with the Chinese internet groups just to give you a sense. But PDD, that closed right around that gave back some of those gains, closed right around the 200-day moving average. DQ took out that virgin point of control that was lingering there from the last time, but this was a nice scoop in here if you played that. And certainly you could take targets, take your profits here at 67. This was up 14% for the day. Big move. Futu was another name that I couldn't believe that was showing a pretty good, decent chart that got above the 200-day moving average today. So I think that's one to watch for tomorrow. 56 is a level to target to the upside, right? You could see that version point of control from in here, but yeah, these charts are looking a lot different. And again, China stuff adds another layer of risk, but at the very least, right? This is what to me, it's very interesting because the Chinese internet names, Biotech, which I'll talk about in just a minute, was one of the first. These are like the first groups to break down, right, to show some cracks back in the beginning of last year. And interesting that the Chinese internet names are starting to come back first as well. And at the very least, like if this isn't for you, getting exposure in this area of the market, I think it's very good practice to look to see, names that have had big declines, right? They take time. Most situations, most of the time, right? And what you have here in this Futu is, let me just take these labels off so that you can see the price action, which is most important. But you've got a base, right? And you had exploring lower levels all the way down to 21. So you kind of have some type of inverted head and shoulders, or if not, if you don't want to go with that pattern, just the fact that this based, for about six plus months, right? That's what you want to see for names that have been through a big decline, is that usually they do base, they go sideways, and they kind of lose interest for a little bit, and then they start to go higher. So I think that's a good lesson for a lot of names that we're going to see in the US. Again, it doesn't mean for every area, but you're going to see some of these things kind of act, in my opinion, similarly to that. So I could go through a couple more of those, but I want to talk about the next group, which is Biotech. So this was also one of these areas that really started to kind of break down and underperform. This lost the 50-day moving average for the first major move down was back in May of 21. You had a retest back in here around June, and then this thing really started to slide. And the 200-day moving average, which is why I have it in bold, is it's important. You had a retest and a failure here, another failure here. That's when the equally weighted biotech ETF was 134. Now we're looking at something that's at $70. Notice, so a couple things to realize here. When we look at the S&P, or you could look at Nasdaq, right? The S&P took another leg lower after the May low back on 520, right? And so that's how this kind of that's the picture of this this chart. When you look at XBI, and I think it's important to kind of look at some of these areas of the market to say, hey, well, this started to kind of move back to the lows too, but it did not take out that low from May. So it still has work to do. In my opinion, it's got to get over this this value area, which is 7160. Also, I would watch the 50-day moving average, but this may be something that goes sideways. If it doesn't make it above the 50-day moving average here, maybe this 50-day needs to kind of flatten out a little bit and start to take its time. But again, I think it's in the process, right? I don't want to say the low is definitely in for this year, but it's looking much more constructive, and I like the relative strength that goes on, that is happening here. The pharma names, speaking of, this is biotech, of course, but when you look at the pharma names, they actually had a really nice day today. The first thing that kind of caught my eye was UNH, right? That's a very big day, right, for United Healthcare, up 6%. Now it did run into resistance, so I would definitely keep an eye on this this 482 level, right, to see if this is really going to turn. But this did slip below the 200-day moving average, right? So interesting there. A few other names that I thought were notable for the day. Merck, right? Remember, Merck had that big breakout of the sideways pattern that we saw here. If you want to look at a weekly chart, it's a little bit more representative here, right? So it kind of caught back into this nice looking bar here and started to bounce nicely for the week, up 4%. Another one too that I tried trading about a couple weeks ago unsuccessfully is this United Therapeutics. Right. I was basically trading. I was looking for this the price action to break out of this flag. Unfortunately, I think I cut it on this day because it broke the pattern of what I was looking for. But monster day today for this name, up 4%. And let's see if this starts to kind of resume higher. So that's definitely on my watch list for tomorrow. A couple other areas that caught my eye, and again, it wasn't every area that did well today. There were some things like Meta, which continues to go down regardless of its call activity. Netflix also didn't sat today out 2.6%, even though I think it got a upgrade today. So again, this wasn't an everything day, and like I said, some things stalled. One name that I like a lot in the software space is this Aspen Technologies, right? This again was on we put it on our watch list. I was watching it in here around the 20-day moving average. It didn't hold. It did get to the 50-day moving average and held this gap and rocketed higher here. So the level to trade against at this point, or if you bought this and you're using trailing stops, would be right around this 194.90 level. All right. I think we talked about DQ taking out that virgin point of control. I also bought some of the CALM, right, which is a play on food. Right, and this got back above its 20-day moving average. Here's the 50-day moving average in here. So I did take a couple like quick targets in this thing today, and we'll see if this can climb above. Whoops. Right, I would watch this 48 level. Notice how it consolidated also for the rest of the day. Didn't give back much, but 48 would be a nice level for this to get above. Let's see, anything else on my watch list that caught my eye. A couple of the other, last thing we'll talk about here is a couple of the other plays in the EV space too. So NEO, I'm looking for NEO to get up to about 24. Right. There's also a VPOC up there. XPEV, which trailed off, I think, a little bit at the end of the day. right? Also getting out of this pattern here and pushing higher. LI also saw some calls today too, which was quiet on Friday, but continues to be strong. JKS, another one in this space, right, was up 10% today. This thing, had a potential breakout, sat back down in here to the 20-day moving average, and very strong move today, up 10.5%. That's another one I think to watch for tomorrow. All right, guys, that's it for today's video. Have a great night, and I'll see you tomorrow.